This is the Build Wealth Canada podcast with Cornell Schreiber, session number 1.
Welcome to the Build Wealth Canada podcast, where it's all about becoming debt-free, accelerating your wealth, and taking control of your money. Now, here's your host, Cornell Schreiber.
Hey, it's Cornell here, and welcome to the very first episode of the Build Wealth Canada podcast. And in this first episode, what we're going to do is really just talk about what this podcast will cover and what you can expect to get out of it if you listen to all the future episodes. And really, what we're going to focus on in this podcast series is really 3 key pillars. The first being money management, how to become a master of money management, and really utilizing that to get out of debt in the quickest amount of time possible. And then once you get out of debt, how to actually manage your money effectively so that you can strategically allocate it accordingly to the best investments for you. So that's the very first pillar. The second pillar that we're going to focus on has to do with investments. I mean, if you've already started investing or thinking about investing, as you know, there are a lot of options out there. There's a lot of conflict of interest in the different industries as well. It's frankly very overwhelming, even for people who are actually educated in that field. So that's something that we're going to talk about a lot as well, really just to demystify the different myths out there, and also just to let you feel a bit more comfortable making investments, making sure that you don't get had by a lot of the really bad investment advice that is out there. And the last, but definitely not least, pillar that we're going to focus on is about earning money on the side with your hobby, which really, in my opinion, has a lot to do with personal finance as well. A lot of us have our day-to-day jobs. A lot of us have hobbies as well. And really in this day and age, it's really easier than ever to be able to monetize our hobbies so that it does generate extra income for us. We can use that income however we want. We could use it to pay off our debts quicker. We can use it to invest, or it can be basically a source of fun money for us that we can use to go on vacations and then buy the things that we'd like. And then meanwhile using our day-to-day income for our day-to-day expenses. So those are really the 3 key pillars that we're going to be focusing on in this podcast. And so let's go into each one of them in a little bit more detail, starting off with the money management piece. So really what we're going to be focusing on is really showing you the best practices in money management, and also how to get rid of debt in the fastest time possible. Now, when I talk about debt, I'm not just referring to what most people think of when they think of debt, which is sort of the typical consumer debt where, we use our credit cards and we buy electronics and toys and, things of that nature. And then, we're in debt before we know it and we're paying really high interest rates. So, that's, we're definitely going to be tackling that because oftentimes those are the most highest interest type of debt out there. But we're also going to be talking about how to pay off your mortgage quicker or any other debt that you may have, whether it's car payments or student loans, for example. So basically how to become debt-free in every single way in the quickest time possible. And really, when it comes to money management and paying off debt, these two really do go hand in hand. If you are managing your money effectively, if you know where your money is going, you know how to utilize it properly, that really gives you the tools to pay off your debt in the quickest amount of time possible. And once you've paid off that debt, you have the ability to invest a lot more money so that you can retire early or, spend it on maybe some of the other things you'd like to do, certain experiences or things like that, maybe some favorite charities you'd like to donate to, etc. So, we'll talk about these best practices, both from my own perspective as well as different experts in the field. We'll definitely have some experts on the show as well, sharing with you what they recommend. And as well, I'll share with you some of the tools, techniques, and different strategies when it comes to mastering managing your money and paying off your debt. And just to give you a bit of a background as to where I'm coming from when it comes to all of this, my wife and I actually hit a pretty big milestone last year in that right after turning 29, we became mortgage free. And we had no other debt as well. So, no student debt, no car debt, no consumer debt, no debt at all. Plus, we had our mortgage fully paid off. which I later learned is actually a pretty rare thing. When I looked into this a lot more and saw what the average debt is in Canada for most Canadians, and when I hear these stories about people being in their 40s, 50s, 60s still paying their mortgage, and I also came across some articles too that are actually published in a newspaper of these big accomplishments, these big highlighting these really successful individuals who were able to become mortgage free in their 30s, which is great. I mean, it's fantastic, but that's kind of when it really hit me that, well, I think we're onto something here, because we were able to do this in our high 20s, right? That's something that's even more rare, I think. And so really I wanted to share with you the different experiences, the different practices that basically I employed to be able to do that. And what actually happened is that right after turning 29, we became mortgage free, but actually at 28 is actually when I had all of the money ready to go to pay off the mortgage fully. So it was just before I turned 29. So actually, technically, at 28, we became mortgage free. I had that money in my account ready to go. But just after I turned 29, that's when everything officially happened. Because obviously, as you can imagine, certain things have to happen before you pay off your mortgage. You have to transfer the money. There's all these confirmations that go in. So finally, when I had the actual documents in my hands saying we were mortgage free, it was just after turning 29. So that to me is fantastic, and really it's been quite a life changer, both sort of in a physical sense, because you're no longer worried about money at all, but also very much from on a psychological level too, because when a really interesting thing happens when you have no debt at all, including having your mortgage paid off. What it does is it really destroys any sort of fears or worries that you have about money. It's just very liberating, to say the least. For example, just to give you an example here, my wife, at the time of this recording, actually works at BlackBerry. And if you've been following BlackBerry, they haven't been doing very well. There's been a lot of layoffs and just a lot of people losing their jobs. And I imagine that's extremely stressful for people, not just for people working at BlackBerry, but if you work for any company where there's layoffs and you see people getting fired. I mean, it messes with you a little bit, right? It gets in your head and you start worrying and, instead of enjoying life, you're wondering, well, what happens if I get fired tomorrow, right? So in our case, I mean, despite all these people losing their jobs, despite her being on the chopping block, as far as I know, I mean, I had no way of knowing, we didn't really worry about it at all. If she got laid off, we had these conversations and it wasn't that significant. I mean, it would have been an inconvenience if she got laid off, because, well, we'd have to find a new job for her, and that's time we would rather spend doing something else. Sure, so it's an inconvenience, right? We'd rather go on vacation instead than help her with her resume and all. But I mean, ultimately, it was no big deal. I mean, we get the severance. We don't have to worry about the money. We don't have the well over $1,000 coming out every month to pay off a mortgage or to pay for rent. So I mean, it puts you in this really stress-free, liberating situation, which is really, really nice. What's also really nice about being debt-free is that you really stop worrying about things like the economy, like the interest rates, or you hear about a plant closure and what might happen. And I mean, it's a lot of these things, bad things happen, and they are unfortunate, but it no longer stresses you out. You no longer worry, well, what if my the interest rates go up, and what if I can't keep paying my debts because the interest rates have gone up too much, right? What happens? I mean, you don't have to worry about that anymore because you have no debt. So it's nice. It's very, very nice, and like I said, very liberating. And also, once you are debt free, you can save for retirement very, very quickly. And what's also great is that once you're debt free, you are able to afford a lot more things, frankly. Now, you obviously have to be careful. You don't want to sort of do these bad things where, now you go out and you go lease a Ferrari or something ridiculous like that, because, hey, I'm debt free now, I can do these things. I mean, you want to still, not destroy these practices you've been employing to help you get debt free in the first place. But it is nice if you do want to, let's say, experience something in particular, right? And not too long ago, I remember I went skydiving, and that was something. And I mean, those things that's kind of an expensive experience, but it's something that some people would like to do, try out. And maybe you're a bit more conservative than that. Maybe you would like to go and I don't know, go rent a cottage somewhere and spend that time with your family. I mean, these are certain experiences, certain things that you have a lot more leeway now. You can afford a lot more now because you are debt free, and you're not paying for those things with debt. So really, I mean, if I'm hopefully, just by just giving you some of those examples, I really hope that you're excited about just or see the value of being debt free, not just from the obvious perspective of having more money, but also on the psychological level of, the stress reduction, you can focus on the things you really want to focus now because you have that freedom, because you don't have these shackles of debt on you, basically. And it's really worth mentioning that this is something that you can definitely do. This isn't some sort of rocket science that, I don't know, you need an MBA from Harvard or something like that to figure all of this out. It really isn't all that complicated. It does take some discipline, and it does take a few key skills that you are going to have to learn and develop. And if you do those, you will find that this is all actually very, very achievable. In fact, a lot of it really comes down to 3 key things. And none of those 3 things require you to actually make a giant substantial income. You don't need an extremely high income to be able to do any of this. And so I'll share these different components with you and how you can apply them as well in the next podcast episode. But for now, imagine whatever you have right now that's going towards, let's say, rent, or that's going towards paying off your mortgage. So let's say, I don't know, $1,000, $1,300. I mean, obviously this depends where you live, but let's say it's $1,000, right? Let's be conservative here. Imagine having an extra $1,000 in your bank account that you can spend or invest or just utilize however you wish. That's a pretty nice position to be in. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, that's a lot of money every month that you can now use however you see fit. To me, that's a very attractive goal, and that's really what got me motivated to get rid of our mortgage as quickly as possible so that we are able to be in a position like that. So, I mean, hopefully those kind of examples really, really demonstrate how liberating it is, both, at a psychological level and also at a sort of in a physical world, how nice it is to not be in debt and have that extra sort of cash flow every month. So if you're not there yet and you do have some debt, whether it's you have a mortgage or you have some consumer debt or student debt or car debt, really any sort of debt at all, one of the goals of this podcast is really to teach you the things and help you in such a way that you can get out of that debt in the quickest way possible. And I'll be sharing my own experiences and techniques and best practices that I've used to become mortgage free at such an early age. And also I will have different experts in as well that I'll be interviewing, asking questions, picking their brains a bit to see what they recommend. Maybe they have certain tactics that would work really well for you as well. So definitely, if you are still in debt, this is really a podcast that you will get a lot out of. Now, if you're not in debt at all, or you have some, little debt, but you want to learn certain other areas as well, I mean, we're going to be talking about best practices in money management. And I mean, this is something that transfers over when you're in debt and when you're not in debt. So when you're in debt, you use money management to get out of debt as quickly as possible. You use those best practices then. When you're not in debt, then it gets into, okay, well, I have this money now. What do I do with it? So that's where we get into our second pillar that I'm going to be focusing on a lot in this podcast series, and that is the subject of investments. All right, so pillar number 2, investments. Now that we have this money that we can use however we see fit, because once again, from pillar 1, we are being masterful with how we're managing our money. We've paid off our debt, or we have a good plan as to how to do that. We're implementing it. Well, now, once we have all this money, the next phase is, well, how do we invest the money? Should we be investing it? Well, of course. I mean, we can't all work forever. We are going to need somewhat of a nest egg. I don't know of any particular job where you can just keep working until you're, 92. Maybe one exists, but I don't think that's most of us. So we do want to make sure that we do definitely put some money away and invest it appropriately. Now, what is our goal? That's really the big question to ask here. Our goal of this podcast when it comes to investments is to be able to give you the knowledge so that you will have the financial means to be able to do what you want when you want. Okay, so I'll say that again. Our goal when it comes to this podcast and investments is to give you the knowledge, the tools. And I mean, I'm not trying to sell you investments or anything like that. It's to give you the knowledge so that you can go out there and you can make the right investments for you, so that in the future you will have the financial means to be able to do what you want when you want. Okay, now this goal, it's different for every person. The end result that you're trying to receive is different. So when I say do what you want when you want, well, some of us would like to retire very early, right? Just not work at all, okay? And that's fine. And so we have to plan for that, right? Other people like me are weird and just like to work. We like to work. We find it intellectually stimulating. We would get bored if we were on a beach for weeks on end. And we just like to work for, I guess it's the way we're wired. I don't know. But that's me, for example, right? So in my case, right, I don't necessarily want to retire early per se, but I would like the ability to take off as much time from work if I want to. So if I want to go with my family and do a trip somewhere or go do something, I have the ability to do that when I want for as long as I want, and have the ability to work on what I want when I want, right? So, I mean, it's a bit of a different sort of retirement mentality, right? It's not, I want to stop working completely. I just want the freedom to be able to work on what I want when I want. So if there's a certain project that interests me that I like, I want to be able to do that. I don't want to have someone say, you have to go work on this project because, I'm your boss and this is what I'm telling you to do. And if you want to keep your job, you basically have to do this thing. So, I mean, that's my goal personally. And I'm sure there's some people some listeners here that can relate to that. And that might be you. Or you just want to fully retire, which, like I said, is fine with me. Either way, your investments, you can modify them and invest strategically so that you can achieve that goal. Now, just as a kind of a side tangent here, what's interesting is I remember 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, where he mentioned this, and he brought up the concept of mini retirements, which I thought was really, really interesting. I don't know if that's can't remember if that's the exact term he used, but it was really a big paradigm shift for me, in the sense that instead of having this end goal of retiring, well, what if you try to structure your life now in such a way so that you're actually enjoying your work, you're enjoying your life, you're doing what you want to do, instead of just holding back and, one day I'll be able to fully retire and finally be happy, right? I don't want to wait that long, right? We would all like to be happy now. So that, I think, is an interesting way. So instead of, saving up for this big end day of your work, to instead set up your life and structure your life and your work in such a way that you can take these mini retirements. So you take a certain amount of time off, could be longer than the typical 2-week vacation or whatever the case may be, and go and you do what you want. Then you come back and you can, you come back and you're still working, and you're working on what you like and in a job that you love. So personally, that's more of a type of a lifestyle that I would like to have. And if you haven't ever heard of this before, or have never considered it before, this might be quite the paradigm shift for you. And I mean, I think it's at least worth considering to do it that way, as opposed to having the more traditional retirement. Not to say that one form is better than the other. And realistically, at the end of the day, eventually, we're all going to have to take the more full-blown retirement, just because when we're in our 90s, we're probably not going to be able to work as well as we are able to work right now. And so we do still need to prepare financially, no matter which sort of lifestyle we choose to pursue, so that when we are at that older age, we're not dependent on others, we're not a drain on others, and we are able to sustain ourselves successfully and not live a life of poverty, which frankly, it's pretty scary when I hear about how little some people actually have saved up for retirement and are hitting some of these older ages already. So that's just something to think about. Just as a side note too, anything I mentioned, for example, in this case, I mentioned the book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And in the future, I'll be mentioning more sort of resources that are useful, tools that I personally use that I find beneficial, really anything that I think could be of value to you. I'll be posting all of that, the show notes, plus all those different resources, tips, tricks on the show notes for the particular episode. And so in this case, to get the show notes for this particular episode, just go to buildwealthcanada.ca/1. That's buildwealthcanada.ca/1. 1 being the show number. So next week, when I shoot another episode of this podcast, it will be, the show notes for that episode will be at buildwealthcanada.ca/2. And so that's kind of a nice, easy way where you can basically get everything, because I realize you might be driving right now, or you don't have a pen, paper handy. So this way, you can just remember to go there and get all the show notes, download any sort of materials I may be giving away, or any sort of references or anything like that. So that's just kind of a little aside that I wanted to make sure you know about. All right, so really moving on, when it comes to investments, we're still investments, we're still on the second pillar. The other really big thing is there are a lot of options when it comes to investing, a lot, and to the point where it's actually ridiculously overwhelming. I mean, let's take a look at it. There's real estate investing, there's mutual funds, there's index funds, there's ETFs, commodities, real estate investment trust. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and it can be very overwhelming, frankly. And as we know, generally, just as human beings, when we have too much information, when it is information overload, when we're not sure really how to proceed next, when we're not sure what the next action is that we're supposed to take, what generally happens, and I mean, studies have really shown this over and over again, is that we just don't do anything, actually. So despite having all this information available to us these days, having too much of it can actually be a detriment, because it's just too much. We say, okay, well, let's put it off. I'll look into this some more later, and we just kind of leave it to the side. And so that's obviously a very dangerous thing to do. I mean, we can't just put off investing for retirement, saving for retirement. We can't just put that off to the side forever. I mean, eventually we're going to hit that age, and the more you wait, the harder it's going to be to save the right amount of money for your retirement. So this is definitely one of the big goals I have for this particular podcast, is to basically be very transparent and to show the pros, cons of the different investment options, what the different experts are saying, and really making it easier for you so that you can decide what types of investing is correct for you. And basically the goal is to make it so that you're not overwhelmed, I'm not overwhelmed, that's fairly straightforward, and that we can make a good, educated decision on our investments based on what we learn in this podcast. And so I'll be sharing some insights with you that I have. For example, I do invest in real estate right now. We have some other investments as well. So I can share with you my own personal experience. But at the same time, there are many different experts in this field in different types of investing. And so I will be bringing other experts onto the show and get their take and pick their brains a bit and find out what it is they're recommending. Who are these investments right for? How do we actually do it? And I mean, that's really a huge thing. I mean, just to give you an idea too, as an aside, when I first got into the whole investing thing, it was overwhelming for me as well. And I don't have sort of the average background. My background is actually in business. I went to Wilfrid Laurier University, and I took the business co-op program there, which I know at the time it probably still is one of the best business schools in the country. And so even still, I'm not saying this as a bragging thing or anything like that, but just to prove the point that despite going to one of these top business schools, I still found it a bit overwhelming with all the different investing options that exist. And I just couldn't help but think, well, if I'm running into this, if I'm feeling this particular way, then how is everyone else feeling who didn't study business for their entire life? I can only imagine how overwhelming all of this can be. Because I mean, I got overwhelmed, right? Should I buy another house, another investment property? Should I do, get some ETFs? Should I be doing, like stock picking instead and just listening to different analysts, right? Index funds, should I be doing that? I mean, and which types? I mean, there's just so many questions. It's just wild. And there's a lot of people who make a lot of money basically giving you information, telling you what to invest in, where they have huge conflicts of interest, where they won't necessarily advise you on the best thing for you. They will advise you on what they're kind of told to advise you on. So if they're making if you're trying to sell someone something, a certain investment product, let's say, like a mutual fund, and if I'm working for a particular company and they say, Cornell, if you get people to buy this particular one here, we will give you a higher commission because this is our fund. This is one that we manage, and we make a lot more money off this. And because we make a lot more money off this, if you sell our fund, we will give you a higher commission. And then now I go back and I'm trying to, advise someone, right, on what the investments they should have. Well, there's now a huge conflict of interest there now, right? I'm telling you to invest in something that maybe isn't the best for you. I mean, what you're investing depends a lot on so many different things, right? There's your risk tolerance, your age. There's kind of where you have things invested already because you want to diversify. So, I mean, there's just all these different things. But, when someone has a financial interest in just selling you something so that they themselves make more money, I mean, that's a huge flag right there. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to also expose in this podcast, because there are so many conflict of interests, and it's quite frustrating. And when you talk to some of the people that have been in the business and you listen to them, I mean, you get that sense as well, where it's not very fair, because the typical Canadian doesn't read personal finance books for fun, isn't highly educated on all these different industries and the business models they use to make money, and so it can be easy to be deceived by some of these individuals, and it's not because the average person isn't smart or anything like that. It's just that these people in these organizations are very, very good at what they do. They're just very good at sales. They're very good at marketing. They make their livelihood trying to persuade people that their investments are the best way to go. And so that's somewhere where I really, really want to shine some light, just so that you don't invest your hard-earned dollars into something that is not right for you. I mean, it could result in you getting a horrible return on your money because of all the extra fees you're paying, as is the case for many mutual funds, for example. Or it could be you losing all your money because someone gives you a certain hot tip or gives you a certain investment opportunity, and they kind of sell you on it, and you don't really know what mines to not step on when it comes to that. And it worked well for them, but maybe it didn't work well for you, and you lose a lot of your money, and now you can't retire. So I mean, there's so many ways, and so that's something that I really want to talk to about on this podcast and bring experts in that can shed some light and help educate us as Canadians, because frankly we don't really learn this in schools. I mean, even when I was in university, I took a personal finance course, and this was a fourth year business university course, fourth year, I remember thinking, okay, well, this is great. I'm thrilled that they're offering this. It's nice to finally learn about, how to do my taxes and what to avoid and investments and things like that and retirement planning. But I'm a fourth year business student. I mean, this is something that everybody should be taught, right? And so that's, that I think this podcast, I'm really hoping for it to be a way to help others who might have not necessarily had the luxury of getting educated at a certain business school, or don't want to read novels or like dozens and dozens of personal finance books. I will do that for you, and I already have, and be the number one source, hopefully, for these different types of things. So anyways, moving on, that's just really what we'll be covering as far as the investments pillar goes. And the third and final pillar, which definitely isn't the last because it's the worst, it's actually one that I'm extremely passionate about, has to do with earning money on the side with your hobby. And this might seem a bit of an off-topic subject, perhaps, because so far the other two pillars, it's very much talking about personal finance, right? And how to deal with your money, manage it, how to invest it. But these days, earning money on the side with your hobby, something that you're passionate about, that you love, that you don't actually perceive as work, is easier than ever. It really, really is. It's unbelievable how much technology has progressed and how accessible it is now to people these days. For example, I'm very passionate about personal finance, investing, and having an online business, let's say, right? Those are things that I'm really passionate about. Well, now I'm recording this podcast, and anybody can listen to this podcast. I mean, anybody in the world can do this. That's not something that was very easily attainable in the past. I mean, in the past, if I wanted to, have a radio show, let's say, I guess that would be the closest possible option. I would have to, I don't even know where I would start. I mean, try to network, I guess, with people in the radio industry and try to, I don't know, give them some samples. I mean, of how I would do a show, and hopefully they think it's good enough and they put me on, at like 2 a.m, and hopefully I get somehow recognized for that. And I mean, that would be rough. It would be very, very rough, and the chances of success are a lot lower. Whereas, and I mean, try doing that as a side thing too, right? I mean, good luck. So now it's completely possible, right? It's completely possible to do. And I realize that perhaps you don't want to do a podcast. I mean, that's just one example that I'm using here, but you can have your own site. You can shoot really good videos for very little price these days. You can create a blog and monetize your passion that way. There's so many different ways. And this is just something that you can do and enjoy it and make side income from it that you can then use however you see fit, whether it's because you want to use it to pay off your debt quicker, let's say, or you want to use it to buy investments, or maybe you just want that side business to basically use it for fun money, right? Just so you have some money coming in that you can use to go on vacation, to buy sort of the consumer items that make you happy, or the experiences that make you happy, and so that your day-to-day job that can go towards paying off your mortgage and saving for retirement, and then but all your fun money comes from your side business that you really enjoy. So when it comes to earning money on the side, really, the way I look at it is that there are two different kinds. There is the active income side, and there is the passive income side. Now, the active income is something like freelancing. So, for example, graphic design. If you're a graphic designer, you might have your day job, but then you might do some graphic design on the side. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can sell your services online, potentially even charge higher rates than what you're getting paid at your job. But maybe you want to keep your job because it gives you some stability, right? Maybe they give you benefits, things like that. There could be a lot of reasons, but I mean that's one way, right? Or if you're into video production, or if you're an expert in something, you can offer your consulting services on whatever it is that you're an expert in. Maybe you're an artist and you would like to sell your art, right? So that's more active income. You actually have to definitely put in the hours. Like if you're an artist, you have to paint the painting and then you sell it, right? So if you don't paint the painting, you don't get paid. It's the way that it works. So that's more of the active income side. And I will have guests on this podcast that can definitely talk to you about that. I personally, right now, I'm not a freelancer or anything like that. I focus more on the passive income way to make money on the side. So I'll go over that in just a second. But the active income is something that I will have answers in, because that is very appealing to a lot of people. If you love graphic design, or I don't know, maybe you record audiobooks, or I don't know, there could be so many things you'd like to do, and you just want to contract out your services, do them on the side, and have a lot of fun doing it. And the money you make from that, you want to use to take you and your significant other out on a vacation, let's say. I mean, it's great. So that's definitely an option. All right, so then your other option that you have, if you're not going to do more of an active income approach, is to do a more passive income approach. And when I say passive income, I'm not talking about the kind of income you make by, let's say, buying a stock and then the company issuing dividends, and so you get paid in dividends. Or let's say you purchase some sort of investment where they pay you interest. So you're basically loaning money out to someone and they're giving you interest. So that's passive as well, right? Because you're putting money away and you're getting money back. Your money's basically working for you without you having to physically be there at a job, for example, trying to make that money. So that's still very attractive, and that's what Pillar 2 was about. But Pillar 3, when I talk about passive income, I'm talking specifically about you having your own business on the side that is generating you income. And when it comes to passive income, I'm talking about a business where you're not trading your hours for money. So in the previous example where you're a freelancer, let's say, well, you have billable hours, right? If you work for a client for 2 hours, you will bill them for 2 hours. If you didn't work those 2 hours, you wouldn't bill them for those 2 hours, and so you would never get that money. With passive income, it's a whole different ballgame where whether you're working on it or not, the product is out there, it's being sold. You could be sleeping and the product could still be getting sold with no involvement on your end, and the money's coming in that way. So that's really an approach that I personally took, and that is something that I do have set up. And I'll talk about that, I think, a lot more in a future podcast episode if you want to hear more about how I set it up and how I did it. But basically, just to give you a really quick rundown as to what it was. Essentially, I started a business where I created a video training program for a sport that I was doing. So, it was a hobby, it's something that's very fun, something I enjoy doing. And I teamed up with some experts of that sport, and we created a video training program for it. And now I sell the program online, and it's a fully automated process. So, for example, no matter what I'm doing during the day, so I could be sleeping, I could be, out with friends, I could be doing whatever, that product is still out there and it is being sold on an international level. And there literally are people purchasing it across the world. And I mean, the whole beauty of it is that I don't have to be there to make that money. Unlike a freelancer, for example, where I have a client that I have to invoice and I have to, actually do that actual work all the time in order to get that money at the end of the day. So, I mean, one of the beauties of it is, what I actually like to do every single day when I wake up is I check my smartphone and I look for emails to see how many sales got generated while I was sleeping, which really never gets old. And it drives my wife a little crazy because that's kind of the first thing I do as soon as I wake up. But I mean, it just doesn't get old to wake up and look on your phone and say, wow, while I was sleeping, somebody someone across the world in a different time zone was looking into how to do the sport, and they saw the product that I was selling and they purchased it. And I just made money while I was sleeping, literally. I mean, that's amazing. I can't express how amazing of a feeling that is, and how nice it is to have that money coming in on the side. So then, I currently, after that, I get up, I go to work, and while I'm at work, so actually, in a more traditional kind of context, I am still making money in that other business, even though I'm working on a completely other business. So it's, so in a way, I'm really amplifying the income that I'm generating, because not only do I have sort of a regular type job, but I'm also making money on the side to the other business without actually doing anything. Now, don't get me wrong, it took a lot of time and effort to learn how to do this. I definitely don't want to make it seem like I just kind of woke up one day, spent a weekend creating a website and building some product, and then all of a sudden, I'm some multi-millionaire that's retired now and, living on the beach somewhere. I mean, that's definitely not the case, right? I mean, I'm not making millions of dollars with this thing, right? I'm not saying it was necessarily easy. I mean, it like with anything, I mean, you did take some time to learn and how to do all of it and how to set everything up and perseverance. And then, even after you make the product, you have to learn how to actually market it, right? So, I mean, it's not some freebie thing that you're going to get. It's not one of those get rich quick schemes, that you hear about, right? It's definitely nothing like that. But the beauty of it was that once I did it, once it got all automated, it was great. I mean, it started paying for all my fun things. For example, if I wanted to go out to eat, the profits that the business made, I could spend them on that. If I wanted some new techie toy, I could spend the money on that, right? So, I mean, it was this extra side income that I was making that was basically paying for all the fun little things I wanted to do, and all the money I was making, on a regular basis in my sort of day-to-day type work. I mean, that could go towards paying down the mortgage quicker, getting ready for investments, things of that nature. So it was really, really nice. And then the money kept growing and growing and growing. And eventually it wasn't just, paying to go out to eat. It was paying for a portion of our vacations and almost our whole vacation at some point. And then it kept going and going and going. And then eventually, when we bought a house recently, for example, I was able to use a lot of the money that side business made and use it towards a down payment on our new house, which was huge. It was huge. In Canada, actually, it's called the mortgage insurance fees, where if you don't have 20% set for a down payment for a house, you have to get mortgage insurance, and this mortgage insurance is in the thousands of dollars. And so I don't want to pay that. I'm sure you don't either. No one wants to pay an extra several $1,000s on top of what they're already paying to buy a house just to be able to own a house. And so getting that 20% down payment was very, very important for me. I don't want to throw thousands of dollars away. Well, because I had this side business that was making this money, I was able to reach that 20% much, much easier. Well, I was able to do it. I mean, if it wasn't for the side business, we would not have been able to reach that 20%. I mean, we definitely wouldn't. So, I mean, it was great. It was great. It was unbelievable. And that never gets old. I mean, when you're able to do that with a side income. And so in this podcast, I wanted to also share, if this is something that interests you, whether it's the active income I was speaking about earlier, or this passive income that I'm currently doing, that's generating this extra money on the side, that's something I can share with you as well. What I did, what I've done, what I'm working on, what's working, what's not working, so that if you do want to also have something similar in your own life, that you can basically use me as a resource to set something like that up for yourself. So this is something that I definitely will be sharing with you in future episodes. I can go into more details about how I did it, what worked, what didn't, common mistakes I made, what you should be looking for if you're looking to do something like this as well for yourself. And I mean, this is a very, it's quite the opportunity. There really isn't a certain set amount of time you have to dedicate to it. I mean, it definitely does take work. There is a learning curve, but I mean, you can do it at your own pace. You can just go along, you keep learning, put one foot in front of the other, just, you keep going. And eventually you could also generate a nice passive income business that basically generates money for you, and that can pay for all your fun things, can pay for your vacations, can help you get a down payment on your house like it was in my case. Definitely something that is completely attainable. And so really I really want to have this as the third pillar of this podcast, because I really can't imagine how if you're already doing a certain hobby, something you really like, something you're really passionate about, I don't know, maybe it's snowboarding or I don't know, scrapbooking, or I don't know, it could be anything. If you're really passionate about it and you already know a lot about it, why not put some extra work into it and have a way to monetize it so that you are able to retire early, so that you are able to have another source to, I don't know, save up for your child's university, or maybe just to have as fun money, or I don't know, pay off your mortgage quicker. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do that. It's there, the opportunity's there, and I can definitely help you get there as well. And hopefully bring on some other experts as well, who will be able to share their own experiences with you. And in fact, if you are one of these people that have also done something like this, definitely feel free to get in touch with me. We'd love to have you on the show, and you can share your own experience, and we can this way learn from each other as well. There's always more to learn in this world, and this is definitely, I think, a great place to do it as well. All right, that's all for this week for the Build Wealth Canada podcast. I wanted to thank you for joining me here. If you like this podcast and would like more information, whether it's on getting rid of debt quicker, learning how to manage your money better, learning about investments, or about building a side income, definitely come check out more free content on the Build Wealth Canada website. And to get there, it's just buildwealthcanada.ca. That's buildwealthcanada.ca. You can go on there, you can sign up, and I will send you all new content as it comes out, whether it's videos, whether it's new podcast episodes, anything really that I think could help us grow our wealth together here in Canada. And if you are an iTunes user, I would definitely appreciate it if you went onto your iTunes, subscribed to this podcast, gave it a favorable rating. I think that would really help a lot with securing better and better guests for future episodes of this podcast. And speaking of that, if you do want to see certain guests on the show, definitely let me know. And if there are any sort of questions or any sort of topics that you would like covered in future episodes, definitely let me know. And to do that, just go to the buildwealthcanada.ca website, sign up for the newsletter. When you do that, you'll get my email, and you can basically email me directly. I read all the emails, I'll check it out, and we'll see if we can get your question answered, get any sort of guests that you would like to have on the show as well. All right, so head over to buildwealthcanada.ca, sign up, stay in touch, join the community. And like I said, if you are an iTunes user, I would definitely appreciate your subscription and your positive review on iTunes too. All right, so I'll see you on Build Wealth Canada. and talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Build Wealth Canada podcast at www.buildwealthcanada.ca.